Good evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Please take your seats. We'll get started. One thing I would ask you to do is, for those of you that have cell phones, please turn them off. Thank you. General Taguba, General Hedrickson, fellow colleagues, midshipmen, thank you for attending tonight. Many of you know the old saying, those that don't know, study, or learn, select the one you like, from history are doomed to repeat it. So it may come as no surprise that the lessons learned from the 1971 study that is now well known as the Stanford Prison Experiment have direct correlation to the abuses at Abu Ghraib prison that came to light in 2004. Dr. Philip Zimbardo is internationally recognized as the voice and face of contemporary American psychology through his widely seen PBS TV series, Discovering Psychology, his classic research, The Stanford Prison Experiment, and authoring the oldest current textbook in psychology, Psychology and Life, now in its 18th edition. Dr. Zimbardo has been a Stanford University professor since 1968, now an emeritus professor, having taught previously at Yale, NYU, and Columbia University. He is currently on the faculty of the Pacific Graduate School of Psychology and the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California. He has given numerous awards and honors as an educator, researcher, writer, and service to the profession. Recently, he was awarded the Václav Havel Foundation Prize for his lifetime of research on the human condition. His more than 300 professional publications and 50 books convey his research interests in the domain of social psychology with a broad spread of interest from shyness to time perspective, madness, cults, political psychology, torture, terrorism, and evil. Dr. Zimbardo has also served as the chair for the Council of Scientific Society Presidents, representing 63 scientific, math, and technical associations with 1.5 million members, and now is the chair of Western Psychology Foundation. He heads a philanthropic foundation in his name to promote student education in his ancestral Sicilian towns. He is also serving as the new executive director of a Stanford Center on Terrorism, the Center for Interdisciplinary Policy, Education, and Research on Terrorism. He is an expert witness for one of the soldiers in the Abu Ghraib prison abuses and has studied the interrogation procedures used by the military in that and other prisons, as well as by the Greek and Brazilian police tortures. He is most excited about the publication of his most recent important contribution, The Lucifer Effect, Understanding How Good People Turn Evil. At the conclusion of this presentation tonight, Dr. Zimbardo is looking forward to answering your questions. So I will tell you in advance we are going to go past study hour, so sit tight, sit back, enjoy the ride. And ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Philip Zimbardo.
It's wonderful to be here. I'm going to dedicate my presentation to General Taguba, and you'll see why later on in the talk. I'm going to talk about a topic that is not in your introductory psychology text or any psychology text, the psychology of evil. And the subtitle is The Lucifer Effect in Action, and obviously that's me. I promise to try to make the talk dazzling, at least fiery. So I'm going to start with a basic question. What makes people go wrong? This is a question that philosophers, dramatists, poets have asked for centuries. Psychologists tend not to ask big questions. We have really precise ways of measuring, evaluating, doing experimental research. So we tend to ask smaller questions rather than these big ones. But I grew up as a poor kid in the ghetto in the South Bronx. And I grew up with evil. There were kids I knew, really good kids, who did really bad things. Some of them went to jail, some of them got involved in dope, some of them got killed. And so as a kid, I always wondered, what makes people I thought were really good, ordinary kids, do these bad things? And of course, other kids like me didn't do them. So in a naive way, I was asking that big question. And now, many years later, as a psychologist, I now am equipped to begin to answer that question, as I'm going to try to do tonight. I was also impressed as a kid with the wonderful Robert Louis Stevenson story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. If you remember in that story, the good Dr. Jekyll invents some chemical, which when he takes it, he gets transformed into the brute Mr. Hyde. When the drug wears off, he crosses back that line between good and evil, and becomes good again. And he can't resist one more swig, and he goes back. Well, for me as a kid, what was impressive was that I had been led to believe that that line between good and evil was fixed, was impermeable, that there were good people on this side and bad people on that side, and we were safe, that nothing could make us do bad things, and probably nothing could make those bad kids ever do good things. But the story, even though fictional, raised the possibility that that line is permeable, that even like the cells in your body, which are relatively impermeable, still allow the transmission of chemicals back and forth in and out of our cells. So the question is that line permeable? Does it mean that any of us, relatively good, ordinary people, could be seduced across that line? And maybe you don't need Dr. Jekyll's chemical. And so that's what my presentation is going to be all about today. I want to begin with this wonderful illusion by the Swiss artist M.C. Escher. Take a moment to look at it. And as you do, most of you will focus on the white as the figure and the black as the background. Having done that, you see a world full of angels with little tutus. Now you see it and it pops out. But now I want you to look more deeply. Let's enter into that figure ground illusion. And now the demons appear, with the eyes and the horns and the wings. And once you see the white, and then you see the black, your mind cannot resist flipping back and forth. So this tells me several things. It tells me first that good and evil are part of the human condition, that good and evil have existed before, exist now, and probably will always exist. And in fact, the dark and light aspects of human nature are our yin and yang. So I'm going to argue that people are not born good and become bad over time, or born bad and become good, but that we are born, because we have this incredible mind, with mental templates to be anything any human being has ever done. Once something becomes thinkable, imaginable, then it becomes possible for us to do. And so the Lucifer Effect is the second thing that reminds me of. God's favorite angel, according to ancient scriptures, was named Lucifer. Lucifer means bearer of light. In some of the scriptures, he's called the morning star, Venus. It's not clear how he got that exalted status, but it's clear he was. And apparently one day God created Adam, his perfect creature, and wanted all the angels to honor Adam. Lucifer and some other angels said, doesn't make sense. We're angels, he's a mere mortal. Mortals are corruptible, angels are not. And secondly, we existed prior to him. And apparently this was a God who was not into conflict resolution or reconciliation. He said, you just committed two sins, the sin of pride and the sin of disobedience. And so got Michael the archangel and other band of good angels to have a cosmic battle in which Lucifer and the other fallen angels lost. And paradoxically, God created hell as a place to put the fallen angels. So if you will, this is the arc of the most extremely imagined transformation of God's favorite angel into the devil. And so, again, in Christian scriptures, this is the start of evil in the universe. So it leads me to say, what I want to study is not angels becoming devils, but ordinary people, normal people, good people, everyday people, who first begin to engage in what we're going to call evil deeds, bad deeds, immoral deeds, illegal deeds. So that's what the Lucifer Effect is. It's an attempt to understand the process by which any one of us, could on a certain occasion, under certain circumstances, first begin to cross that line from good to evil. Even though we all begin by saying, no way, I'm not that kind of person. I could not be led to do those bad things. Of course, there are many definitions of evil. For me, the psychological definition is evil is the exercise of power. And I think power is the key, at least in my thinking, to intentionally harm other people. And it's harm psychologically through verbal abuse, through bullying, through prejudice, to hurt people physically, through punishment, through abuse, through torture. And then clearly to destroy mortally, physically. And of course, at the level of the system, it's to commit crimes against humanity. So that's my working definition of evil. A colleague of mine has a simple one. He said, evil is knowing better and doing worse. If you Google the word evil, in a third of a second, you get 136 million hits. So evil is built into our very way of thinking. And in fact, if you co-Google the word George Bush and evil, you get 2 million hits. And this was last year. Probably this year will be more. The old-timers in the audience, if I ask you, name a couple of evil people, they would immediately go to Hitler and Stalin. From the people of our generation, they were the embodiment of evil. Each of them accounted for the deaths of millions of Stalin, millions of Russians and Germans, and Hitler, not only Jews, but gypsies and others. For young people in the audience, probably this is the image that would come up more quickly. Darth Vader, the fictional image of evil. And for all of us, he ran and he hid. Osama bin Laden is still out there preparing us for essentially a global war on terrorism. When I say the word evil is used frequently, here's Newsweek magazine saying North Korea's premier is Dr. Evil. So essentially the whole notion of evil is something that societies use to label people who are seen as our enemy as malevolent, as sinister. And also it makes you righteous. The one who has the power to put the label on the other becomes more righteous in contrast. The notion of trying to understand evil in terms of evil people is as old as the Inquisition, the 1400s. In this wonderful book called Malleus Maleficarum, it's Latin meaning the witch's hammer. This was the handbook on the desk of every judge in 22 Catholic countries throughout Europe where the Inquisition spread. The Inquisition spread because two Catholic theologians, Jacob Kramer and Springer, said it doesn't make sense that evil exists because God is all perfect, all-knowing, and all-powerful. Why doesn't God simply say no more evil? They reason that God allows evil as a test of the human soul. Give in to evil, you go to hell. Resist evil, you go to heaven. So they say, so God allows it. But because what the devil did to Adam and Eve, God limited the devil from ever doing his evil on people. Well, the devil is shrewd. So the devil sleeps with witches, and then the witches can corrupt us. So this whole book says the way to get rid of evil is to get rid of the middleman. I call it the WID program, Witch Identification and Destruction. You find out who the witches are in a village, you get them to confess under torture, you boil them in oil, you roast them alive, and you get rid of evil. Well, sadly, this produced the worst evil the world has ever seen. For me, what it did is, it was the ultimate perversion of human perfection. So it's an incredible mind of ours that can create sonnets, that can send people to the moon, that can create, the web, is now perverted to developing techniques and tactics of torture to break the human will. The other thing was, it started a legacy of violence against women because it was the Catholic Church and the state that combined to identify the witches, and when they were killed, they took their property, and the church and the state divided it. And from that time, in many, many countries, women have been seen as the cause of evil, as the temptress that tempt men into evil. Not too long ago, I'm sure all of you were as shocked as I was, when on 60 Minutes there was the revelation that American soldiers, men and women, were doing horrendous things to prisoners in some bizarre place called Abu Ghraib. It sounded like Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves. Nobody had even heard of a place like that. But we saw these images, one after another, of soldiers doing